In September 2024, an estate sale coordinator in Charleston, South Carolina, discovered a hidden photograph album behind a false panel in an antique wardrobe. Inside were dozens of family photos from the 1890s. But one image stopped her cold. It showed a little girl in an elaborate white dress, holding a porcelain doll surrounded by flowers. At first glance, it seemed like a charming Victorian portrait. Sweet, innocent, perhaps a bit eerie, but typical of the era. But when a restoration specialist began enhancing the image using modern technology, hidden details emerged that completely transformed its meaning. Physical evidence in the photograph revealed this wasn't what it appeared to be. This image documented one of the most heartbreaking practices in Victorian America. Something so psychologically devastating that families hid these photographs for generations. This is the story of one photograph, one little girl named Eleanor, and a truth about 1890s death culture that will change how you see history forever. Let's begin. The Ravenswood estate in Charleston had belonged to the Ashford family for 6 generations. When the last heir died in August 2024, at age 97, estate coordinator Jennifer Martinez was hired to catalog 175 years of family possessions before auction. On September 12, 2024, Jennifer was working in a second-floor bedroom when she noticed something odd about a massive Victorian wardrobe. The back panel didn't sit flush against the wall. When she pulled it forward, she discovered a false panel in the wainscoting. Behind it was a small hidden compartment containing a deteriorated leather-bound photograph album. The album contained dozens of Victorian-era photographs, family portraits, outdoor scenes, social gatherings. Most were typical 1890s images, but one photograph near the middle made Jennifer stop breathing. It showed a girl about 6 years old, with dark ringlet curls. She wore an elaborate white lace dress with puffed sleeves. In her arms was a large porcelain doll in a matching outfit. The girl sat in a formal parlor, surrounded by enormous arrangements of white flowers, lilies, roses, chrysanthemums, so abundant they nearly overwhelmed the frame. The girl stared directly at the camera with wide, unblinking eyes. Her expression was completely blank. No smile, no emotion, just unsettling stillness. Her hands were positioned carefully on the doll, as if someone had placed them deliberately. Something felt profoundly wrong about this photograph, though Jennifer couldn't articulate why. The girl's eyes had a strange flatness, a quality that made them look almost like glass. Her skin showed extreme pallor, unusual even for Victorian photography. Then Jennifer noticed the inscription beneath the photo, written in faded brown ink. Eleanor Margaret Ashford, born April 12, 1889. Called to heaven June 8, 1895. An angel with us briefly. Forever in our hearts. Called to heaven. The Victorian euphemism for death. This wasn't a portrait of a living child. This was a post-mortem photograph taken after the child had died. Post-mortem photography was common in Victorian America. With childhood mortality rates near 40% and photography expensive, many families commissioned photographs of deceased loved ones as their only visual memorial. But something about this image seemed different from typical death portraits Jennifer had seen in museums. The elaborate staging, the abundance of flowers, the theatrical quality, it seemed excessive. Jennifer photographed the page in high resolution and contacted Dr. Rebecca Thornton, a photo historian at the Savannah College of Art and Design, who specialized in 19th century American photography. Dr. Thornton's response came within hours. This is definitely post-mortem, but unusual in several respects. I need to examine it closely and do full digital restoration. There are details not immediately visible due to deterioration, and I suspect this has a more complex story. Can you bring the album to Savannah? 3 days later, Jennifer delivered the album. What the restoration would reveal wouldn't just be sad. It would expose one of the most heartbreaking aspects of Victorian death culture, and a truth about little Eleanor Ashford that had been hidden for 129 years. Dr. Rebecca Thornton had spent 15 years studying Victorian photography, particularly post-mortem images and memorial practices. She had examined hundreds of death portraits from the 1800s and published extensively on 19th-century American death culture. When Jennifer brought the Ashford album to her Savannah laboratory, Dr. Thornton immediately recognized this photograph as exceptional in quality, composition, and the story it appeared to tell. She began by creating an ultra-high-resolution scan using a Phase 1 camera system capable of capturing 151 megapixels. This detail would reveal elements completely invisible to the naked eye and expose details obscured over 129 years. The digital file opened on her monitor in stunning clarity. Dr. Thornton spent days working with the image, removing artifacts, correcting fading and discoloration, and enhancing details using specialized restoration software. As the enhanced image emerged, Dr. Thornton began seeing elements that confirmed her initial suspicions and raised disturbing new questions. The girl's face, now extraordinarily detailed, showed clear death signs. Her skin had the waxy, translucent quality typical of post-mortem photography, but with unusual smoothness suggesting cosmetics had been applied. Her lips were tinted slightly pink. Her cheeks showed faint artificial blush. Most revealing were her eyes. Enhanced to full resolution, they showed something Dr. Thornton had seen in only a handful of Victorian death photographs. The girl's eyes were open, but they weren't her own eyes. They were prosthetic glass eyes, inserted into the deceased child's face to create the illusion of life. This practice, while uncommon, was occasionally employed when families desperately wanted their deceased loved one to appear alive in photographs. Special glass eyes could be temporarily inserted, and the deceased could be posed to create life rather than death. But Dr. Thornton noticed something even more disturbing. When she examined the girl's hands on the doll, she saw thin wires running along the arms, partially hidden by sleeves, but visible in enhanced detail. The wires supported the arms in position, common in post-mortem photography, but executed here with unusual sophistication. The girl wasn't simply propped in a chair. She had been elaborately posed, supported by hidden mechanisms, and photographed to create maximum illusion of life. This wasn't just a memorial photograph. This was theatrical staging intended to preserve the child as she appeared in life, not death. Dr. Thornton examined the background. The flowers were all white: lilies, roses, chrysanthemums. In Victorian flower language, white lilies symbolized restored innocence after death. White roses represented reverence. Chrysanthemums signified grief for lost children. But the quantity was extraordinary. Dr. Thornton counted 8 large arrangements visible. The flowers weren't just symbolic. They served a practical purpose. In June 1895, Charleston, temperatures would have reached the high 80s or 90s. Without modern embalming or refrigeration, a body would decompose rapidly. The flowers masked decomposition smell, allowing family and photographer time for this elaborate staging. That meant Eleanor had been dead for hours, possibly days, when this photograph was taken. Her body had been preserved temporarily, cosmetically enhanced, fitted with glass eyes, positioned with wires, and photographed in an elaborate denial of death itself. Dr. Thornton knew she needed more context to understand why Eleanor Ashford's family had gone to such extraordinary lengths. She contacted the South Carolina Historical Society and requested access to Ashford family records, including birth certificates, death certificates, census records, and newspaper archives from the 1890s. Within 2 weeks, she received digital copies of relevant documents. What emerged was a story of devastating loss that explained everything. The 1890 census showed the Ashford family living at Ravenswood Estate. William Ashford, age 38, occupation cotton merchant, his wife Margaret, age 34, and 3 children, Eleanor, age 1, Catherine, age 4, and William Jr., age 7. By the 1900 census, the family composition had changed drastically. William and Margaret were still listed, but only one child remained, Catherine, now age 14. Both Eleanor and William Jr. were gone. Dr. Thornton searched Charleston death records from the 1890s. She found Eleanor's death certificate dated June 8, 1895. Cause of death: diphtheria. Duration of illness: 4 days. Eleanor had been 6 years old, but then Dr. Thornton found something that made the elaborate photograph suddenly, heartbreakingly understandable. William Ashford Jr.'s death certificate was dated March 3, 1895, just 3 months before Eleanor's death. Cause of death: scarlet fever. Duration of illness: 6 days. He had been 12 years old. The Ashford family had lost 2 of their 3 children within 3 months. First their son, then their youngest daughter. Only Catherine, the middle child, survived. Dr. Thornton searched Charleston newspaper archives for obituaries or death notices. In the Charleston News and Courier, June 10, 1895, she found a brief notice. Died on the 8th instant, Eleanor Margaret Ashford, beloved daughter of William and Margaret Ashford of this city, aged 6 years. The family has suffered grievous loss, having recently mourned the death of their son. Services private. The family requests no visitors during their time of mourning. The phrase, grievous loss, and recently mourned the death of their son, suggested the family was psychologically devastated. Losing one child was unbearable. Losing 2 in rapid succession would have been mentally catastrophic. Dr. Thornton found one more document that provided crucial context. In the Ashford family papers archived at the Charleston Historical Society, there was a letter written by Margaret Ashford to her sister in Philadelphia, dated June 15, 1895, 1 week after Eleanor's death. My dearest sister, I cannot write at length, for my hand trembles and my eyes are perpetually wet with tears. We have lost our sweet Eleanor to the same cruel fate that took our William. First my son, now my daughter. Catherine remains, thank God, but I live in terror that she too will be taken. We had Eleanor photographed before we laid her to rest. Mr. Whitmore, the photographer, was extraordinarily patient and helped us create an image where she appears as she did in life, smiling, beautiful, our little angel. I cannot bear to see her in death. This photograph allows me to remember her as she was. I know some will think us morbid, but you must understand, when everything is taken from you, you grasp at any thread of comfort. This photograph is that thread. The letter explained everything: the glass eyes, the elaborate posing, the flowers, the theatrical staging. This wasn't morbid denial. This was desperate grief. Dr. Thornton wanted to learn more about the photographer who had created this elaborate post-mortem portrait. Margaret Ashford's letter had mentioned Mr. Whitmore, the photographer. Dr. Thornton searched Charleston business directories from the 1890s for photographers named Whitmore. She found him. Harrison Whitmore, operating Whitmore's Photographic Studio at 142 King Street, Charleston, from 1887 to 1904. Business advertisements described the studio as specializing in fine portraiture, family groups, and memorial photography. Memorial photography was the Victorian euphemism for post-mortem images. Whitmore had specialized in this work. Dr. Thornton contacted the Charleston Museum, which maintained archives of local business records. They had a small collection of Harrison Whitmore's papers, including business ledgers, correspondence, and sample photographs. Among the materials was a leather-bound journal Whitmore had kept from 1890 to 1900, documenting his most significant commissions. An entry dated June 9, 1895, the day after Eleanor's death, described the Ashford Commission. Received urgent request from Mr. William Ashford to photograph his deceased daughter Eleanor, age 6, who passed yesterday from diphtheria. This is the second child they have lost this year. The mother is nearly mad with grief. She insists the child must appear alive in the photograph, eyes open, positioned naturally, as if merely sleeping with eyes open. I have done this work many times, but never for a family in such desperate emotional condition. I agreed to undertake the commission despite the technical challenges and the distressing nature of the work. A family's grief must be honored, not judged. The entry continued. Arrived at Ravenswood Estate at 8 a.m. on June 10th. The child's body had been prepared by the family, dressed in her finest white dress, hair arranged beautifully. I brought glass eyes from my collection, carefully matched to the child's natural eye color, dark brown. The family requested elaborate floral arrangements to create a heavenly setting. I positioned the child using hidden supports, inserted the prosthetic eyes, and arranged her hands to hold her favorite doll. The exposure required 3 minutes due to indoor lighting conditions. The mother stood beside me throughout, weeping silently. When I showed her the result, she said, "Now I can remember her smile instead of her suffering." This work is not easy, but it serves a purpose beyond mere photography. It is mercy. Dr. Thornton was moved by Whitmore's words. He hadn't been exploiting grief. He had been providing a service that Victorian families desperately needed, a way to preserve memory that focused on life rather than death. She found additional context in an 1896 Charleston newspaper article about Victorian mourning customs. The article noted that post-mortem photography, while controversial to some, served important psychological functions. These images allow bereaved families to maintain connection with departed loved ones, and to remember them as they were in health rather than in death's final moments. For families who have lost children, such photographs are often their only visual memorial, as few families could afford photographs during a child's brief lifetime. Eleanor's photograph wasn't macabre. It was love made visible through desperate circumstances. Dr. Thornton wanted to understand what happened to the surviving Ashford family members after these devastating losses. She traced them through census records, city directories, and historical documents. The 1900 census showed William and Margaret Ashford still living at Ravenswood Estate with their surviving daughter Catherine, now 14. William's occupation was listed as cotton merchant, retired. He had stopped working, presumably unable to function normally after losing 2 children. Margaret Ashford's health had deteriorated significantly. Dr. Thornton found medical records indicating Margaret was treated multiple times between 1895 and 1900 for what doctors called melancholia and nervous exhaustion, Victorian terms for severe depression and anxiety. The trauma of losing 2 children had broken her mentally and physically. Catherine Ashford, the sole surviving child, never married. Census records showed her living with her parents until William's death in 1908, age 56, and Margaret's death in 1912, age 56. Both parents died relatively young, likely from the accumulated stress and grief of losing their children. After her parents' deaths, Catherine continued living alone at Ravenswood Estate. She worked as a school teacher and never had children of her own. Dr. Thornton found a 1935 newspaper interview where Catherine, then 49, spoke about her life. "I lost my brother and sister when I was young. My parents never recovered. I spent my childhood in a house filled with grief. Perhaps that's why I never married or had children. I was afraid of loss. I teach other people's children instead. It's safer that way. Catherine died in 1964 at age 78. Ravenswood estate passed to her cousin's family, eventually ending up with Patricia Ashford Collington, who had hidden the photograph album behind the false panel sometime before her death in 2024. Why had Patricia hidden it? Dr. Thornton found a clue in Patricia's personal papers. In a letter to a friend written in 1998, Patricia mentioned the photograph. I found an album containing post-mortem photographs of Eleanor and William. They're beautiful but deeply disturbing. I can't bear to destroy them. They're part of our family history, but I can't display them either. I've hidden them away. Perhaps someday, someone will find them and understand the grief they represent. That day came in September 2024, when Jennifer Martinez discovered the album and Dr. Thornton restored the photographs. In November 2024, Dr. Thornton organized a small exhibition at the Charleston Museum titled Eleanor's Portrait: Victorian Grief and Memorial Photography. The exhibition included the restored photograph, historical context about post-mortem photography, information about childhood mortality in the 1890s, and the Ashford family's story. The exhibition's closing text read, "This photograph appears disturbing to modern eyes. We see death where the family wanted to see life. We see denial where they saw comfort. But we must understand this on their terms, not ours." In 1895, Margaret Ashford had lost 2 children within 3 months. This photograph wasn't morbid. It was survival. It allowed her to remember Eleanor's face, her beauty, her presence without being haunted by memories of illness and death. In an era of staggering childhood mortality, families created whatever comfort they could find. This photograph was love expressed through desperate circumstances. Eleanor Margaret Ashford lived 6 years. She died of diphtheria in June 1895. Her family loved her enough to create this elaborate memorial. And now, 129 years later, she is remembered not as a disturbing Victorian curiosity, but as a real child who was loved, grieved, and honored in the only way her family knew how. This is Eleanor's story. And now you know the truth behind that photograph from 1895.